Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 6 of ScholAceStic, a podcast where I help you ace your scholastic pursuits. Today I'm going to discuss how to write a top-scoring analytical essay. Let's get into it. I used to be really bad at writing essays. On my worst days, they were boring and poorly constructed. On my good days, they were mediocre at best. So how did I go from writing terrible essays to scoring top marks for every single essay I wrote in the latter half of high school and all of college? The key lies entirely in structure and being willing to say something outrageous. Now, you obviously need to have good technical skills, such as proper grammar and punctuation, varied and interesting sentence structure, and the knowledge of how to cite and paraphrase correctly. But if you have the basics down, you just need to add good structure and a bold claim to make an incredible essay. It might sound silly, but the essays I scored highest on, and am proudest of, all have one strange thing in common: a wild thesis statement. Now, obviously, my thesis statements were not so wild and unfounded that they had no basis in the text. You have to be able to back up everything you claim in an essay with solid textual evidence. To give you an example, I claimed in one of my essays that the death of a loved one is experienced by the characters in the books I analyzed, turned them into selfish people. This claim was not immediately obvious from the text themselves, especially because one of the texts paints the main character's actions, subsequent to their loss, as selfless instead. However, with clever textual analysis and very intentional word choice, I was able to demonstrate that these actions portrayed as selfless were in fact extremely selfish. By appearing to contradict the message of the books with your thesis, you create interest for your reader and encourage them to read your essay. Nobody wants to read an essay that makes exactly the same argument as the books themselves. So, how do you go about creating a bold thesis statement? Firstly, you need to pick the books you're going to analyze, if you have to analyze multiple. Determine a theme that each of the books contains, and see how each book deals with it similarly or differently from the others. Then, try to make an argument about how each of the books deals with that theme. Try crafting multiple thesis statements, then choose your favorite. Alternately, think about an argument you'd like to make about the books, then see if you can find textual evidence to back it up. Sometimes you'll come up with a thesis statement that is okay, but then, when you create a thesis with the opposite claim, it stands out because it sounds like a wild proposition given the books, but it can be proven to be true. Proposing the opposite of my original thesis statement is yet another way I've come up with a bold but defendable thesis that interests the reader and makes for a good essay. A lot of times, the ideas for my thesis statements came from key quotes from the books that I had found that I really wanted to discuss. I usually had fairly strong opinions about events, characters, quotes, and themes in the books, so it wasn't hard for me to turn those opinions into an argument about the books themselves. That said, as you're reading a book that you could write an essay on, form your own opinions about what you're reading. Don't simply be a passive observer of the information. Engage with it. You'll likely enjoy the reading more, and also have interesting and exciting things to say about it. How about coming up with the structure of your essay? If you're like me, then you learned the 5-paragraph essay method first. If you don't already know the 5-paragraph method, I would highly recommend looking it up and getting really good at using that structure first before advancing to a slightly more complex structure. What I use in my essays is similar to this, but adapted to fit however many books and points I have to discuss. Typically, the paragraphs in my essays run as follows: Introduction and thesis statement, first point, second point, third point, all of these with evidence and in their own separate paragraphs, counter-argument, refutation, and conclusion. The number of paragraphs varies, as does the number of points and counterpoints, but this is generally the structure I prefer when writing my essays. Something you should really work on is coming up with solid counter-arguments. When you come up with a weak, easily refutable argument, that's called a straw man argument, because it's easy to take down. To really convince your readers of your point, you need what's called a steel man argument, a strong, powerful, convincing argument that's hard to take down, to the point that you could almost convince your readers that this is the correct viewpoint, only to take it down with an even more powerful and cleverly worded argument. Some students dread creating a powerful counter-argument, but for me, it's one of my favorite parts of the essay. It's like playing devil's advocate to my own argument, and it's so satisfying tearing down the steel man with evidence and careful critical analysis. Anybody can have an opinion, but only the cleverest people can back theirs up with evidence and quash even the most powerful counter-arguments. Anyway, these are the main ingredients in my previously secret formula to crafting an elegant and powerful essay. I hope you learned something and enjoyed this episode of ScholAceStic. If you use the tips I discussed in this episode, let me know how it worked for you. If you all have your own tips on writing amazing essays, please share them in the comments so we can all learn from each other. In the next episode, I will talk about how to romanticize studying and make it more enjoyable. Work hard, take care, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.